Hello, Dr. Brianna Ladapo and Dr. Joe Ladapo.
Hello. It's so nice to see you.
So nice to see you again, Brianna, and so nice to see you, Joe. I'm so grateful that you have made time for us today.
Oh, thank you. Thanks. We're happy to.
I'm here with Dr. Brianna Ladapo and Dr. Joe Ladapo. I've interviewed Brianna before a couple times, but I'd still like to share a brief bio here, and then I'll share a brief bio of Dr. Joe Ladapo too. Dr. Brianna Ladapo is a naturopath and the author of Emerging from Darkness, a spiritual memoir and guide back to the light. She lives in Florida with her husband, Joe Ladapo, and three boys, where she has a trauma counseling practice and works with nonprofit organizations to heal trafficked and exploited children. Dr. Joe Ladapo is the current Surgeon General of the state of Florida. Woo, woo, woo. And professor of medicine at the University of Florida. Prior to this role, he was a tenured associate professor at the UCLA David Geffen School of Medicine since 2016. He graduated from Harvard Medical School. Is there anything that either of you would like to add to your bios?
No.
I'm the author of Transcend Fear. So that's the book that I wrote.
Okay, Transcend Fear. Okay, I'm gonna have to get that book too because I absolutely adored Brianna's book, so I'm sure yours is going to be just as wonderful and filled with light.
His book is amazing.
Okay, good. Transform Fear. So I'm so thankful that you both are here to talk about homeschooling and unschooling because when Brianna and I did our interview together, she did mention, I wish my husband was here to talk about our experience. So, Joe, can you share a little bit about your thoughts on homeschooling?
Sure, sure. Well, it's really Brianna who's leading it for us. I can't physically do it. It's just not possible. And it's something that she really wanted to do. We've had the boys in public school and private school, and there are just some issues with the school system. And I went to public school and private school when I was growing up, and I think that in some ways things have gotten worse with how students are taught to think. And I think that if students were really more able to not only learn things in the classroom, but still develop, completely like independent beings. And I think it would be better. But my sense is that there's just more and more conformity. And that just, that's not good for people. And I think it's actually worse now than it was when I was a kid. I'm not sure, but from everything I've seen, I think it's actually gotten worse. And and people and the teachers and systems moving away from really more traditional scholarship. So it's something, and in addition to that, sometimes there are, things that are just plain harmful that are being taught in school, unfortunately. Some of the frameworks, for example, for math were things that I didn't think were really good for students. And there are obviously some ideas that have come up in some classrooms that relate to social issues, whether it's gender issues or just just stuff that is just nuts to be trying to instill in a child. I mean, completely insane. So with the combination of everything, I mean, I was fine just looking, trying to find a better school, but Brianna really just one day she did not want to continue, and one day she said we were trying to figure it out how we would transition them, and one day she just ripped the band-aid off and said we're doing it, and she did it. So that's how we got here.
Okay, yes, that tracks as to what you had said at the Back to Basics conference where I had heard you guys speaking. And you had said that Brianna is more the intuitive spiritual side of things, and you are more of the sciencey side.
Mhm.
Well, what I find in that statement is this scenario that you guys have is often very common in a lot of households, right? It's oftentimes the mother who is intuitive and pulls for homeschooling, unschooling, whatever that is. And the father sort of like drags their feet, they sort of trust, but then they kind of like go along. So, I mean, now that you guys have been homeschooling for a while and you both are advocates of it, Joe, do you find that following Brianna's lead has helped you connect more to your own intuition?
Well, Brianna has definitely helped me connect to my own intuition, period. I
Yeah.
read about some in the book, but I was really largely disconnected from it, with the exception of probably the loudest voices in my intuition. And the other piece that was there is that, it's interesting because of the work that I've done. I don't know how much Brianna you guys have discussed in the past, but I also worked with Christopher Maher like Brianna, and so I've really been able to, profoundly develop my my connection with my spiritual being and my connection with energy and our existence as energetic beings, and also have physical benefits from it and emotional benefits, mental benefits, and all together they allow me to just actually be able to tap in more to my intuition. And what's interesting is sometimes I can think back to experiences that I had before I met Christopher, and I'm able to now read those situations as if I were there with my current skill set. So it makes me realize that in fact the body seems to always be collecting all the data, but you may just not be able to read it to compute the data to translate it. So honestly, the whole journey's been a journey of building on intuition. I mean, I think when I think of the real benefits, the boys are like so much happier. It's like completely ridiculous because we have very
Mhm.
sensitive boys, and they're sensitive in the sense that they're sensitive to their surroundings. So if their surroundings are unhappy, if their surroundings are disordered, if there's a lot of pain in the emotional and energetic field, if there's a lot of anger, resentment, distrust, discontent in the emotional and energetic field, they feel that, and it harms them. I mean, everyone feels it, but I think these our boys just they're just very sensitive to it, and so it changes how they behave and show up and how they feel, and so they're just so much happier. It's like night, it's not even close. And then they learn a lot of cool stuff, and Brianna uses a few different curricula curricula
Good question.
curricula.
Curriculums.
And and so the sometimes when I'm home, I get to overhear some of the discussion and teaching, and it's really awesome. I've actually learned a lot about history actually from listening into some of what they do, and Brianna's there to also teach them other lessons. So that's been really great too, like about thinking independently and about being able to recognize propaganda and being able to recognize why historical events occur, the often very common themes, whether it's greed or fear, or how people's behavior changes or is controlled at a population level. So it's really been, I've been really happy with how they've been learning.
That's wonderful. And so the deprogramming from the systems that the children are sort of learning just to kind of be more critically thinking, that is coming from you, Brianna?
Well, it's coming from both of us. So much of our relationship and our connection is based on these shared ideals and values. Um, the idea of justice, truth, transparency, benevolent leadership, these are all things that have always been very important to both of us. So it's part of our bond. So it would have trickled down anyway. But Yes, I am actively including these things in our curriculum. I almost hesitate to call it a curriculum because although I like curricula, I think we're going to adopt that. Yeah, but we do use a collection of several different curriculums, but several different types of approaches and learning styles. But whatever we do, just in the context of whether it's sitting down with a book, whether it's being in the kitchen, learning our math through cooking, or being outside in the environment, I always try and educate through the lens of thinking critically, thinking independently, thinking benevolently, thinking at a community level, if you will, thinking about humanity, how this affects the collective and not just the individual. And I'm so grateful that our boys are so intelligent. I think they already had this knowledge. They have so much intuition themselves, such big hearts. But I hate to think what would have happened if we had left them in the school system. And we were starting to see it, especially with our eldest son. Unfortunately, that institutionalized way of learning it strips away individuality. It puts the child's light out, that joy and that wonder and that curiosity that makes kids so amazing and such a gift. The system just sucks it right out of them. And in my experience, it usually doesn't come back. My wonderful husband and I have been to hell and back to reclaim our own youthful curiosity and exuberance and love and a feeling of safety in the world and a feeling of connection. So we're trying really hard to make sure our kids never lose it in the first place.
Right. Right. And that is why Perfect Child exists, because I see that. I see that hurt people. And we
Yeah.
have a lot of hurt people hurting people. Even in
Yeah.
my own parenting journey, from the beginning, I've had this notion of parenting from a place of love, but I'm also parented from an authoritarian style. And, it was only my daughter was like 15 when she told me, when you did this, it made me feel I had to eat this in order to get I had to eat the bad stuff in order to get the good stuff, right? Because I was making her finish her food whether she wanted it or not. And it was like, oh my God, like I'm taking away her agency. And here it's because I wanted her to understand. I wanted to teach her not to waste food. But in that trying to teach her, I took away her agency. Right. And so, like, there's like the programming and the conditioning as parents is so real. So like, how do you guys continue to work through deprogramming and the perceived societal norm of like learning and learning outcomes and teaching?
Such a good question. Maybe you want to go first?
Sure, honey. Yeah, no, I totally understand. And I think that what I'll share a thought and I'll say what I think. As we were talking about school, I feel like if I and I'm definitely stereotypical nerd in terms of how I think about school. But I think that you actually could fix or go a long way to fixing the school system, ironically, if there was less emphasis on like teaching. Because it just occurs to me that if there were if you kids could do just like literally like if they had classes where they determined what they would be doing, things like that and we just it's been pushed to this it's transformed to the extent where it's all about this checkbox and it's not good for the for child's development. They may learn, I mean, assuming they even retain it, but they may learn more material stuff, but it's bad for their development, which means it's not worth it. And kids who and parents who want more of that material, I mean, they can make the effort to obtain it, to teach their kids it, but trying to do that for all kids, it's just way too restrictive. They just don't have enough ability to be beings, to really develop into whatever they're they want to develop into. And it's just as we're talking about, I'm realizing that, which is really unfortunate. I mean, there's so much emphasis on the check boxes and like everyone's got to take these tests and all that stuff. And we probably could make all of that simpler to give them more room and space to do to do whatever it is their hearts and minds are calling for. Um, but going back to the question, what I found with that stuff, and I've definitely been there and continue to be there. What I found is that one of the great benefits of being able to unburden your a substantial amount of your stress and your tension and your trauma, which is what the benefit of working with Christopher Maher was. And it's completely transformative. One of the benefits is that you have a more intimate connection with reality. And and for most of us walking around with our pain and our anger and our self-doubt and our anguish and all of that stuff, it bleeds into reality. So you have this experience, your experience of life is actually not reality. It's like reality plus all this other stuff that you carry with you. And what I found is that the more, and Brianna and I both, and especially for me, because I need more help, number one. And number two, I just, a lot of the benefits I experienced are through physical sort of manipulations, if you will. So I do a lot of physical stuff. I'll do a lot of handstand stuff. I do a lot of stuff on the ground, and it's all intended to continue stripping away layers of stress and tension. And so even after working with Christopher, I spend probably about an hour every day in total between morning and night working on my body. And I just find that with time, just again, it's layer after layer because the layers came on, it came on layer upon layer, and it goes away layer after layer. And it just is, I find that as more comes off, I become more aware of things like little mental traps and routines I'm falling into and I become more aware of, why am I, making my son do that, or why am I not responding to his anguish and trying to push him in one direction? Like, what's that about? So more of that sort of comes to mind. I might have been doing it for years and all of a sudden, oh, there's a new realization that, hold on, what's that about? And so again, just like sort of the difference between whatever reality is and the things that we bring into sort of merge with it. Right.
Yeah.
So
Well, to your point earlier, my love, when you were talking about how schools are and the focus on essentially making people conform and behave and going through the motions and checking the boxes, we have a system that is all about doing and not at all about being. So kids never learn who they really are because from the moment they're born, they're essentially being told, not only is this what you're supposed to be, but if you're not, you're bad and you're wrong. And unfortunately, that message stays with you. As I think we all know from our past experience, it takes work to unravel that type of trauma. But in terms of how it's been for me to have to deal with, but I've had to unschool myself. And I was a little surprised, to be honest with you, because whereas my amazing sweetheart is a very rigorous academic and a scientist, I'm more of a free spirit. I'm very intuition driven, and I do love academics very much, but my style is very different. I'm usually very, very flexible and I have a more casual approach. So I was very surprised to find all the ways that I was being a stickler for old useless paradigms and had no idea. I was still carrying these things around in early days of homeschooling. First of all, I spent about 2 weeks with a planner. This is very embarrassing, but I'm going to tell you the truth because I want other moms who are considering this to know this is part of the process. I had a planner and I literally wrote a plan for every 30 minutes of an 8-hour day. And then I showed it to a friend of mine. She said, "What are you doing?" She said, "That looks like school." She said, "The point is that we don't do this." I was like, oh, why do I feel the need to do this? Like in my old traumatized, the part of me that had to become very type A in order to survive the system was trying to foist this on my children as I was trying to remove them from the system. So we had a good laugh because that's ridiculous, right? But sure enough, we carry, the body keeps the score. We carry these experiences. And like Joe was saying, sometimes you don't know what's happening with you and what you still believe and that's not really yours and what you're carrying until something comes up that makes you confront it. And boy, children are nothing if not a mirror for our own trauma, right? And what's not working. So there have been so many moments where one of them would say, well, why do I have to do math first? Why can't I draw if I want to? And I thought, why can't he draw if he wants to? Who's watching? Like, why is the problem? I thought, isn't this the reason we're doing this? But there have been hundreds of little moments like that where I have had to check my own beliefs, my own perspective. And a lot of this has been unschooling me. So as the year went on, things got a lot smoother. And quite unsurprisingly, once I let go of these expectations about how many hours we need to do and how many subjects we need to cover and all these books we need to read, and I just started having fun with them, we actually learned more. We got through more because if you allow the day to flow and you allow it to work for everyone's personalities and learning styles, you develop this beautiful natural rhythm that ends up serving everyone better than any schedule or school ever could.
Right. And since you're saying that, I want to ask, when you learned how to allow your children to develop naturally, right, with a little bit of guidance from you, was there ever moments, Joe, when you would come home and just be like, what did the kids learn today?
I do. I do because I'm critical and skeptical by nature, and but what I found is that they just, I mean, it's clear. Brianna will show me actually some days what like stuff that little Max did and stuff that Jack went through, and she'll show me some of their work, and they're clearly doing very good stuff, and Eric also, and he's older, so I actually work most actually with him on his math, and so we've been doing algebra and so I get to kind of observe more directly what he's doing. But yeah, I do wonder that. But I get this, Brianna will show me, and sometimes when I'm home, she'll just pull out the books. We'll flip through the books. She'll show me pages that little Max completed, and then I do hear them sometimes when I'm home, and the board has stuff. We got a whiteboard that I installed in the house, and that's got stuff on it that they've been doing. So I get to see it.
Yeah.
In conversation too. Recently,
That's
we
a
were
great
out and
point.
about. It's so
Yeah,
much
yeah.
fun.
They'll be like like the stuff will come up that they learned. I'm trying to think of a good one recently where the boys knew stuff. I mean, you guys were once talking about Greek mythical gods,
Yeah,
and they
they'll
knew
pick
more
up
than I
on
do.
they'll pick up on references and shows or movies and they'll spout off a line of knowledge.
Yeah,
Our 6-year-old corrected someone's pronunciation of the Peloponnesian Wars last week. I was like, that's right, homeschool.
Oh,
yeah,
cool.
yeah,
But they love it too. They're
yeah,
proud of
yeah,
their knowledge.
Yeah, of
Uh,
course, because they have agency over it. And it was fun. And it's fun being with mom and fun showing dad.
yeah, 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 totally.
It's so much fun.
So, how has spending so much time with your three different little humans and for Joe, just kind of like witnessing this development of three very different humans changed how you view the world and how you show up in it?
Yeah.
For me, so we were We chose to have children very deliberately. We wanted a family. We planned all three of them. So, at least for me, I thought in my mind that, we were doing everything right. We had a plan, we this, we that. And, in the old days, we had breakfast together and everyone went off to school and work. And then we had dinner together and talked about our day. So, it really wasn't until the pandemic, actually, that I realized how much of their lives we were missing by sending them off to school. And I thought, oh my goodness, the things that happen in those 8 hours that you're sending your children to a different environment, beyond the fact that you have no control over that environment and what they're learning and who they're around, but just what you miss. I mean, kids develop so fast. I mean, every mom knows, every dad too. It goes by in the blink of an eye. So I started to realize that I didn't want to miss any more of those moments. And so when we started homeschooling, the most fun part for me has been getting to see how each of them responds differently to information, how they learn differently. And my favorite is when we're talking about something historical and they get into a very well-reasoned argument about why something might have happened. And I tell you, these kids, so they've never had any particularly formal education about history or government or politics. They're little. Our eldest is only 11 and was in school off and on until he was 10. And certainly, we haven't spent a lot of time talking to them about the ins and outs of why things happen in terms of politics or government. So to hear the ideas that they're able to organically generate when no one is getting in the way or putting ideas in their head or telling them, well, this is what happened. Instead, we'll talk through the facts as they are presented. And then I'll ask them, why do you think this happened? Why do you think this person made that choice? Do you believe this? And to hear them discuss, especially with the three of them, because they're so, so, so different. I think I mentioned last time, but our eldest is very kind and gentle, quintessential academic student. Our middle one is evil Knievel, come back to life, won't wear clothes, certainly won't do what you ask, and won't believe anything you tell him. And our youngest is the master of the universe, masquerading as a human being who will lecture you on your moral choices. Absolutely. He's only 6. So to hear them really get into it from their different experiences and perspectives and understandings of the world, and of course, their different personalities and learning styles, it always amazes me how, even though one's coming from this direction and one's over here and one's over here, they have such wisdom that they all eventually arrive at a very logical conclusion. And in terms of how this makes me see the world, I have to wonder what would happen if we stopped institutionalizing children altogether and went back to the village model of raising our children to be good human beings. Because academics, yeah, they're important. However, they're nowhere near as important as being able to think critically, be a decent human being, be kind, considerate, compassionate, and empathetic. These are the things that we're losing in our society that have led us to where we unfortunately find ourselves today. And I don't think, if we want out of this,
Yeah.
we've got to free our kids. We have to let them be who they came to Earth to be.
Yes, correct.
Yeah,
Did
I agree, honey.
you have anything you wanted to add to that, Joe?
Um, I mean, for me, it has been uh, just very jarring, and just seeing how, because at first we didn't even know how it would work, and again, Brianna just ripped the band-aid off and kind of sort of jumped out of the plane with the parachute and just figured she'd figure it out on the way down,
Didn't
and
open.
she did. And so it's really just completely upended all my prior beliefs about education. So, so that's, I mean, that's definitely been a big piece for how it's changed my perspective. And I, again, I was very traditional in how I thought about school, and actually, our experience led me to read this book. Oh goodness, the author's name I think is something like John Grady, and he's a former New York school teacher, and the name of the book was Dumbing Us Down or something like that.
Yes, Dumbing Us Down by John Gotti.
Oh, okay, got it. Yeah, yeah. And read it twice actually, just to try and absorb more of it. And at first, I just didn't buy it. But between watching what Brianna's been doing with the boys and and he listen, understanding the ideas he was putting forward, I'm getting it better, and it's really just mind blowing. I mean, something that he writes that stands out in my mind is that he says something like, Ben Franklin, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, none of them had sort of formal schooling, but you would never say any of them were not educated. And that really sticks out in my mind. And we're so far from that now, and it's like Brianna's saying, it's coming at great cost to the to development of beings, right? It's just like about content, but certainly in our society, less and less about becoming a full, robust, impactful human being. So that's really stuck out in my mind. I know not every family can do it, and I think that seem to be some schools that come closer to approximating it. Like I hear about these Waldorf schools, and they seem to be coming closer to approximating it. Ironically, I was when I'd read about them, I was sort of, oh, this is too unstructured years ago before any of this. But now I am appreciating the wisdom
Excuse
in terms of like investing in your son or daughter being a very powerful human being, which every human being is when he or she approaches his or her potential.
me.
So it's been a real eye opener for me. It's very much challenged and upended, fortunately. I mean, all of these beliefs that I had about education and all that super upended them. But then, of course, when I kind of my path to meeting Brianna, I fortunately I had the good stuff in there, but I was way more of a um, kind of what would I say, like a sort of an operative unit, you know, do well in math, do well in economics, do well in medical school, than a human being. Far, far, far from being a real human being. And um, the path is now I feel like a human being. And of
Right.
course I can do the other stuff too, but
Yeah. You mentioned Waldorf schools, and interestingly enough, my daughter did go to Waldorf school. And I do believe that Waldorf school early education can be beautiful, but I pulled her out because
Mhm.
again, it was still a teacher up at a chalkboard talking
Yeah.
to children and feeding them information.
Yeah, I would
So,
never attended, so I've just really based that
yeah.
on like, what I've read about really actually more of the early younger education, but yeah.
It's really just kind of like getting in there, and if you can't homeschool or unschool, make sure that where you're putting your child, that they're thriving.
Yeah,
Listen to their cues, watch for their cues, tune
right.
into them. I know
Yeah.
there's the Sudbury School and Macomber Center out in Massachusetts that are very self-directed. Those are
Mm.
kind of something beautiful to look at. I believe that every public school should have a garden, and the curricula should be centered around the gardening because if you're gardening and you know where your food comes from, then you're eating your food. And gardens are so prolific that the abundance that you get, you would naturally donate it to those in need. So you're living in service to the community, which I
Mhm.
think would just, and it takes away all competition, right?
Mhm.
Because you're just working towards beautifying the earth and growing food.
I love
Yeah,
that.
yeah, I hear you. Yeah, no, I think there's a lot of wisdom in that, a lot of wisdom, and we've really, I mean, we've lost our way. And I like what you're saying about if your kid's thriving, because that's the point, right? Like can they thrive? And and I'm sure that there are environments out there where kids can thrive, and the setting is congruent with their desires and their wants and wishes and aspirations. And I could see that, but then there are a lot of, I mean, it seems like there are a lot of times that's not the case. And then you add in all the stress and the unhappiness that people bring into that school and classroom environment so often. I think you get what we get now, which is just a lot of kids who are lost. They're, sort of, they're so self-involved that they're, um, not able to appreciate other important things, and they're unfortunately easily manipulated because they don't have a strong internal compass. And I think fortunately our boys they're um, they're going to be robust to that.
Yep. Yay. That's so wonderful. Dr. Joe Ladapo, I just want to thank you for the work that you do in Florida, leading the
Oh,
way and standing in your truth.
uh,
And in standing in your truth, you're standing for truth for many, many individuals. And
mm,
that's so important right now. So
oh,
thank you for that.
thank you. And you know what? None of it would be possible without her. That's how I met Christopher Maher, and I can't tell you how many critical junctions I've been to where I need to make a decision that I talked with Brianna and made the right decision. So yeah.
I love it. You
We're-
guys are the best. And I know that I had mentioned this in our first interview with Brianna, but the reason also why I wanted to interview you both, and mainly Brianna too, is because when I saw you guys speak at the Back to Basics conference, the love you guys have for each other, like your models of relationships should always be. Just you guys are so lovely. Thank
oh,
you. Thank you.
Thank
it's sweet.
you.
And I want to be mindful of your time. So is there anything else that you want to add before we end our time together?
I don't, I think that it's just so interesting, this whole homeschool thing. And I don't think anyone who doesn't want to do it should do it, but I think that the more people that can do it, that do it, it will really have an impact that will reverberate to just very, very broadly and very widely for the better, because we need more souls that all that. What happens when so many people can be so easily manipulated was completely on display during the COVID-19 pandemic. I mean, that was a tragedy upon tragedy upon tragedy, and you cannot get away with things like that when people are grounded and they know themselves and they know what life means to them and what matters for them, whatever that might be. You can't get away with stuff like that, but unfortunately, you can when people are disconnected and they don't know who they are. Um, and so I hope that more and more people take that who can take that step. Look closely at going to be what's going to be best for their kid, and and pursue that, go on that journey. And so yeah, that's my hope.
And for any parents who are considering giving it a try, I want to address a couple things briefly that I wish someone had told me before I started. It's easier than you think. It's so much easier than you think to homeschool. I was very nervous at the outset because it's a big ocean of unknowns. There's just so much. There are so many ways to do it. There's so many curriculums. There's so many co-ops. It's like, oh, but you'll find your way and very quickly. And the other thing I hear a lot out in the world is, what about socialization? And this is my favorite homeschool question. Everyone's so worried about them getting socialized. And forgive me if I told you this story, I can't recall, but our kids had amazing friends when we lived in LA. And when we moved here, they really struggled, which is odd because our boys are incredibly friendly. They're the kind of kids that run onto the playground and quickly have 10 other kids running around with them. And they were struggling to make any relationships that were more than superficial, honestly. And they kept saying, "Oh, we miss our friends at home. We miss our friends back home." It wasn't until we pulled them out of school and then we found our homeschool crew. We're part of a co-op. They instantly had 20 new best friends. And the best part is these kids range from age 2 to age 13. They all take care of each other. There's no ageism, no weirdness. The eldest take care of the youngest and the middle guys. Everybody helps out. Everyone pitches in. You never have to ask. All the moms have each other's backs.
Mm,
All the moms are watching all the kids. And it's such a beautiful thing. It's the way that I always thought that it should be, but didn't think was possible anymore.
mm,
And now our kids can't wait to see their friends. They're possibly the best friends they've ever had. And so, in terms of socialization, having 30 kids in a classroom with your child is not the same thing, especially when you don't necessarily share values. These are not always happy or well-adjusted children. That's not the same thing as having a small, very close-knit group of people who share your values, who want to do life with you and grow up the same way and raise their kids the same way. That is so infinitely more valuable. And every single one of these kids, and not just in our co-op, we do field trips and stuff with homeschool groups all over. All of these children that are being raised with love and connection, they can talk to a person of any age. They can look you in the eye. They can express themselves critically and intelligently. They can argue their case and tell you what they believe and why. They don't have their faces in a phone. They are not terrified of everyone who's not their age because they've only ever been exposed to one group of people, which now I think is crazy. That's another thing that didn't occur to me until I took them out. I thought, what are we doing? And it's such a wonderful environment. So I would, for anyone who has been wrestling with that, I would cross the socialization issue right off the list. This is not a problem.
yeah, yeah, it's absolutely. And it's like it's way more, it's better to have connections with people that you're really connected with than superficial stuff that where just because you're around someone doesn't mean you're around other people, doesn't mean you're actually getting something from it. So I agree. And the more, this is another reason I hope more parents and families who can do it do it, because it makes everything easier
It does. And so much
with the
more fun.
network.
So
Yeah,
much more.
yeah.
Yeah. And I would say if somebody is considering it, look deeply at your can or can't.
Mhm.
Because if you set that intention, you can oftentimes find a way.
Yeah.
Be willing to make changes just so you can homeschool your child because you see that as the best path. Because that is what humanity is asking of us right now.
Yeah.
Courage.
I agree.
Me too, completely. And it's not something I can imagine anyone would ever regret.
No.
We moved heaven and earth to make this work because it was pretty infeasible at first. If you're looking at it from a purely pragmatic perspective, we thought, where are we going to find this extra time, this extra support? But like you said, if you have a clear priority and you create your intention around that priority, you can make it happen. And I couldn't be happier that we did. I'm
Yeah.
so glad. I think all five of us are very grateful that we made that leap.
Thank you. Thank you both for your time.
All right.
Oh, thank you
Thanks
for having
to
us.
thanks to.
Thank you. Enjoy your week.
All
You
right, you
too.
too.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.